Hello and welcome to The Nation. I'm GERARD RATNAM. Now, Malaysia has spent the past few years rebuilding economic confidence. A lot of work has been done on that side. This includes strengthening the ringgit and stabilizing key economic fundamentals. But we live in a world where global events can move markets overnight. Conflicts, shifting alliances and sudden policy decisions change thousands of kilometers away, and we see the ripple effects here. Now, we're looking at social media every day and we're trying to make sense of what's happening around the world. But on the back of that, I'd like to talk about something that's strengthened in the past 2 years. The government has taken a lot of different measures to bring the ringgit back to strength. And now we want to try to hold the ringgit there. If I can call the ringgit her, I will. Having said that, we have Dr. Tan Chee Meng in the studio with us. He's no stranger to Bernama TV, and I get to interview him for the first time. Dr. Tan Chee Meng, thank you so much for joining us once again. My first interview with you.
Mine with you too, yeah.
After knowing you for what, about a year, or more.
Fantastic.
Having said that, how do we preface this interview? So I want to talk about the ringgit. I want us to understand certain things about the economy. We have all these big words that's being thrown around or thrown about by economists like you, scares us sometimes. And even if we want to be a part of the conversation, we are afraid to say, no, I don't think I'm smart enough to be in this conversation. But I think all of us are stakeholders and we need to know a little about the economy. But the good thing is the ringgit has strengthened. And I think by talking about the strengthened ringgit, we get to understand a little bit more about where we are as a nation in the scheme of things. So how do we preface it? I've been speaking too long.
Not sure how to preface that, but I'm definitely glad to actually be here and actually, as usual, and actually be interviewed by you. And I think that what you said is really correct, that very often maybe economists actually throw very big words that most people actually don't understand. But the answer is you could actually tone down the jargon and actually put words in such a simple form that people can understand. The ideas are simple, but maybe the precision is the reason why the analysis can be very technical sometimes.
Right. Having said that, when conflicts erupt somewhere in the world, what is the usual first economic shock? I mean, for countries like us, we're not a warring nation. We hear thunder outside the house on a rainy day and it scares us.
Right.
So when something like that happens around the world, what is the first economic shock?
You're looking at commodities. I mean, like food, you're looking at things like precious metals, like gold, energy, like oil and gas. These are usually the things that usually get, affected first, in part because a lot of traders are probably afraid that if there's like a major conflict taking place somewhere, that would actually cause maybe trade routes to be interrupted, transportation to actually stall, and that would actually cause the supply to actually dwindle as a result. That would actually cause shocks for the most part.
Right. So to move forward, we need to move back a little bit. Now, let's talk about the ringgit, the strengthened ringgit. How did we get here from the past 2 years? I know there have been a lot of fiscal reforms. Reforms by the government. Can you just explain to us what fiscal reforms are and how it has helped strengthen the ringgit?
I mean, one of the things that the government has done very, very well is that it's moving into subsidy rationalization. So you're spending less money on the subsidies, and that money can actually be put into more development programs like education, like maybe farming, structural infrastructure reforms or structural reforms in the government and so on. That's one thing. And of course, the government has actually done very well in reducing the debt as well. All these different things come together actually.
Has it done well in reducing the debt? What have they done well? Give us an example of something they've done well.
As an example, for instance, when you have subsidy rationalization, when you start doing stuff like that, the money that would actually be put into the budget for developing, programs for the people would actually be there, because the money that was used for subsidies are actually not being spent as much anymore. So imagine that if you're spending this much for subsidies, and eventually now you say, I'm reducing the subsidies, and it's only this much that I'm using for RON 95, whatever it may be. The rest that's actually there would actually be used for development programs. You're talking about roads, you're talking about building schools, hiring more teachers, for instance, and so on. So these are the fiscal reforms that would actually be very, very good in actually creating a very dynamic and a very developed state. That's the reason that's what I mean anyway.
But when you say subsidy rationalization, that there used to be differing views with regards to subsidy rationalization. on a whole, or when you look at the subsidy rationalization, do you think it was well executed?
I mean,
because
definitely,
there were naysayers at the
right.
point when these subsidy rationalization programs were being rolled out.
I mean, of course, there's definitely room for improvement no matter what it may be. But if you're looking at it from the ringgit standpoint, then what's really important is actually giving investors a clear signal. So if the government is saying that we're really interested and very serious about trying to cut our budget and not spending as much and then actually doing things more responsibly, that would actually create a very positive signal to consumers, to investors from foreign countries to actually say that, oh, look, the government is actually not spending without thinking. And so this may actually be a better place to invest right now. That's actually one of the main reasons why the ringgit has actually strengthened as well. That's a signal that the government's giving, which is positive.
Right. So tell us a little bit about the strengthening of the ringgit, how the ringgit got there, and how do we keep it stable at this point?
I mean, there's 2 points to this. There's the domestic reasons for why the ringgit is actually stronger. I mean, whether you're talking about being fiscally more responsible as a government, talking about subsidy rationalizations, you're talking about development programs, things like that. But on the other hand, a very big reason why I think the ringgit has strengthened against the US has to do with the fact that Trump's policies are not always very stable. They're not always predictable. And that creates a business environment, an economic environment of great uncertainty. So when people are actually less certain about the US, they will invest less in the US or buy less of the treasury bonds from the US. And as a result, they would actually put their money elsewhere. So in comparison, Malaysia is getting stabler. And then American situation.
Are you saying we got lucky, or it's just?
It's both. I mean, we're actually doing the right things right now, as far as I can tell. But it's also because of macroeconomic or international environments that are actually causing this to actually occur. So it's not just because the Trump situation has created, a stronger ringgit. It's because the Malaysian government itself is also doing certain things that's actually boosting investor confidence at the same time. That plus what Trump is doing or not doing is actually making the ringgit stronger, I think.
When we see an ecosystem like this where everything's working for everyone, and America is Forrest Gumping from one foot to the other, what's it like for you as an economist if you had to speak to policymakers now and say, look, we can further solidify this or strengthen this by doing this? What would be one or two recommendations you would give policymakers at this point? I know it's very early in the show because I'm going to digress to something else very quickly. Yeah.
I would say that whatever the government is doing or plans on doing, they should actually keep doing it, because you can't just signal something and say, okay, I'm going to do subsidy rationalization, and then I do it halfway and I don't do it for the rest of the other kinds of subsidies I'm actually doing. And you have to actually have structural reforms as well to make sure that, anti-corruption, for instance, is a very, very big thing. One of the things that actually boosts the international confidence within a country is how serious is the government.
and acronyms of that nature.
So essentially what we actually need is you need the government to be serious in tackling some of the issues that we might actually have. In order to do that, they actually have to say, okay, this is an issue, like for instance anti-corruption. This is one issue that I'm really serious in, and I'm showing you that I'm actually doing this. So not just a small fish that's actually being caught, but the big fishes as well, so to speak. If they're able to do that, that signals very strongly to the international community that Malaysia is very serious in actually trying to clean up its house. That would actually strengthen the ringgit massively in the future.
Right. So as it stands, and before we talk about terms like inflation, interest rates, and exchange rates, we listen to that every day. Some of us draw blanks, and it's really okay to draw blanks when you listen to stuff like that, because the crux of it all is we just need to get a little bit of an understanding, and by just telling ourselves that we don't understand is a great place to start, or at least that's what I think. Having said that, now the world's sort of realigning itself. The different blocks, different allies. How do you see the world shaping out? And I'm digressing before we come back to these simple things I want to talk about.
The world at one point during the Cold War period was between the USSR and the US. And as time went on, the USSR collapsed and there was only one unipolar power, basically one superpower, which was the US. With the emergence of China being an economic superpower and a country with an increasingly superior military strength, that would actually create maybe a two-polar, a double poll system in which people are not just looking at the US anymore, but they're also thinking about maybe what it would be like to be closer to China. So basically what I'm trying to say is, in the past, maybe China was not as attractive as an ally or partner in the past. But the truth of the matter is, based on what is happening in the US, I would say China is at least very stable. It knows what it actually wants. It doesn't invade people very simply. You know.
I mean, they're stable. They don't invade people simply. If you look at the flip side of it, is it because they're economically sound now and they know how to move economically that they don't worry about being a warring nation?
I don't think so. I think historically, when you look at them, they were never very interested in being expansionists beyond what lands they actually had during the imperial Chinese dynasties. So as far as I can tell, I don't think they're interested in expanding territory or influence through that. I mean, they will want to expand economic influence. That is one thing they're doing. And I think that is a very big thing for them, because you're talking a soft power plays a very important role. What happens with the Americans is that whatever they're doing right now may actually be very destabilizing the international order. So communities, countries in the world are interested in looking for a stable partner.
Right, and it's interesting that we're at this juncture where everything is so fragile internationally. Even talking about it, might cause a ripple effect somewhere, which will bring about a little bit more chaos. So we're very worried about that. That's hence why when you can't talk about the big things, let's go back to the small things. Let's talk about stuff that we hear usually and we don't know about, like terms like inflation, interest rates, exchange rates. We hear this almost every day. Let's start with inflation. What does it actually mean for an ordinary person, someone like me, who hasn't had an education in economics like you? Yeah.
It simply means things are getting more expensive.
Okay.
That's what inflation basically means. But of course, there are a host of reasons why.
That's too simple. I mean, can you expand on that a little?
I mean, yes, of course. So basically, why are things more expensive? Every time when I talk to my mom or I talk to anyone who's older, they're saying when I was like 10 years old or whatever it was, loaf of bread was like 5 cents and 10 cents, like what it is right now is $2 and all that. A lot of the reasons why these things actually happen is because there's greater demand for goods. So when there are greater demands and then the supply is actually not up to par, obviously things are going to be more expensive. And of course, energy scarcity, you're talking about oil. I mean, oil, we all know, for instance, is dwindling as a resource. It's not there forever. So when things become actually more scarce or actually less available, this would actually mean that it'll become more expensive. So going forward, what happens is things become more expensive in part because there are more and more people demand stuff. Supply may actually be an issue. And if you have major conflicts across the world, that would also cause transportation routes, energy, supply routes to actually be disrupted, and that would make things expensive. So, I mean, I know inflation sounds like, things being more expensive sounds like a very simple way of putting it, but that's essentially what it is.
Right, so saying now, let's flip this explanation a little bit. If things are more expensive now, as opposed to back in the day, how do we find balance? So let me use a big word, equilibrium.
How do we find a balance? What sort of balance are we talking about?
So if we're saying that a loaf of bread is now 7 ringgit,
right,
how do we then shift the economy a little bit? Now, what does it take for that price of the loaf of bread to come down?
I mean, salaries also increase at the same time. So yes, it's true that maybe 40, 50 years ago, a loaf of bread may be 5 cents or 10 cents, but the salaries also were not as high as what we usually have right now. So for the most part, people may be earning a couple hundred ringgit back in 50, 60 years ago, but people are earning a couple of thousand. So it's true that, a loaf of bread may be 10 times more expensive, but salaries too are in some sense, in some ways, keeping up as well. Although some might argue that that's not necessarily true. That salaries may actually be not on par with inflation, and that might be a problem as well.
Right. So just before we close this explanation on what inflation is, just so all of us understand it, how would you now summarize this before we talk about interest rates?
Summarizing on inflation?
Yeah.
So basically, inflation means that things are becoming more expensive, year after year, and there are a host of factors that actually cause this, whether it's an increase in demand, a dwindling in supply, or geopolitical problems or major conflicts that goes across the world that may hinder supply of energy, causes supply route interruptions. For instance, grain and all that may not be able to be transported from one place to another. That would actually cause a delay, and then things become more expensive because people are eager to have these sort of things. But one reason why inflation can also go up, and this is a very important thing, is even if things don't happen just yet, people actually have if they have expectations that things would actually be bad, that supply routes will be disrupted, a major conflict is going to happen, that would actually cause people to buy more stuff early, and that might actually cause prices to go up as well.
Right. Now, interest rates are often heard in the headlines on a daily basis, or at least on a weekly basis. Why do central banks raise or lower them?
The one primary reason why central banks use interest rates as a tool is because they're trying to combat inflation. So when inflation is actually very, very high, it basically means that the circulation, people are spending a lot of money, money is circulating a lot, and that actually causes a problem for the economy, because you might actually go into a hyperinflation issue that you see in some countries in the past, where a loaf of bread will cost you, I don't know, a lot of money to buy, not just $2 anymore. So interest rates are actually imposed because they would actually mean that it's more attractive to put your money in the bank and store it and actually get more money in the future. So that's what interest rates are for. They're used to combat inflation, and when you raise interest rates, it makes it more attractive for people to store money in the bank, and that would cause less money to circulate within the economy.
So what should we be seeing in the interest rates right now? And what is the myth about inflation rates at a time like this, when the world is once again seeing volatility?
I think what you want to do is, when you have volatility, one of the problems is people are actually very afraid. And they're afraid about doing businesses, maybe. They're afraid of spending, because obviously if there's a conflict, you want to keep money underneath a pillow maybe in case you actually need it. What the government probably wouldn't want to do is raise interest rates, because that would mean that there's less money available for loans as well, because it's more expensive to get a loan, or for a house, for a car, or for a business. What you actually need to do is probably ensure that the interest rates are at this level, if not lower perhaps in the future, so that we are actually stimulating the economy and allowing businesses to actually have better access to financing.
Right. Now, when people say the ringgit is stronger or weaker, what does that actually mean?
Talking about the exchange rate, that's what it means. And
sorry,
what
when
does it
people
mean?
like you say the ringgit is stronger or weaker, what does it actually mean?
Basically means you have to think of the USD and say the ringgit as a commodity, just like any good. Essentially, when you say the ringgit is stronger, it means that maybe in the past, back in ages ago, $1 it's equivalent to 5 ringgit. So you need 5 ringgit in order to buy $1. But when it's stronger, it means that you could actually spend 4 ringgit and buy $1 right now. So our purchasing power has actually increased in that regard. We can buy more USD with the current money we actually have. That's what it means to be stronger in terms of the ringgit.
Right. I guess this one's pretty simple, because we've been exposed to this supply chains. We hear a lot about supply chains, and I think COVID has in some way taught us a lot about how important supply chains are. But would you like to explain this a little bit more as to, how do we understand supply chains in a day like this, like or in a world like we have now?
I mean, supply chain is one of those jargons that mean less than what you actually think. It's essentially the different nodes or different steps that takes you from the raw materials into the finished product. That's what it basically is. It's a chain. It's basically like a series of different things, from raw materials that you actually need. Then you go from raw materials, maybe you actually start doing a second step to build a particular product, and a third product, a third step, and fourth, and so on, before you get to the final. So as an example, for instance, talking about an iPhone. To build an iPhone, you need a lot of different components: electronic, microchips, you need your casing, you need your camera, your lighting, and whatever it may be. So all these different components are part of a series of things or steps that you need to actually take, or a supply chain, before you can actually get the final product, which is an iPhone.
So what you're essentially saying is that an iPhone is not American. I don't know.
I mean, it's built in China.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. It's an American company.
No, I was just trying to catch you off guard.
Oh,
no. Just trying to have some fun in the afternoon. Having said that, Malaysia has worked over the past few years to stabilize the ringgit. What actually keeps a currency stable?
You have to make sure that the government is stable. That one is true. If the government is actually doing very strange things, or the government is, being toppled, or another one comes in, people have very low confidence in a particular country. So that would actually destabilize the currency. And of course, if you have major conflicts around the region and stuff like that, or near you, that could actually cause your currency to fall as well. I mean, there are definitely a lot of different things that could actually happen. But I mean, keeping a government stable and making sure that there are no conflicts around the area are probably one of the major things that you want to have to ensure that any currency doesn't actually fall.
Do you think this government has brought about stability?
I think it has been pretty stable ever since the COVID period. You know, that's my opinion. I mean, I cannot speak for everyone across the country, of course. But in my opinion, of course, I think the government has done what it can do to actually stabilize the economy and whatever international problems we may have with superpowers within the region. I think they have done a fantastic job in sort of balancing that between, say, China and the US.
But when you mention that, what comes to mind is how Malaysia dealt with being the chair of ASEAN, and there was a lot to juggle last year.
Yes, of course. I mean,
what did you see last year, with the coming of Trump, Trump arriving in Malaysia, and I mean lots of other leaders being here? Would you think it was quite a thing to deal with at that point?
I think there was a lot of juggling that our Prime Minister had to deal with. I mean, I was here in the studio talking about Trump's visit as well as the ASEAN meeting that was held in May last year. So I mean, I saw a lot of things firsthand in some sense. I talked about it, and I would say that, you know, given the size, population size, and even physical size of Malaysia, the fact that we actually got so many leaders to come on board to actually talk to us and actually, it was actually a very successful ASEAN meeting. It was the largest, I think, in terms of the number of world leaders we actually got. I think Anwar has done a fantastic job in that sense. It's a historical thing what he did.
Right, for all of us Malaysians who are watching this program today, I think we need some sort of a takeaway. Give us 3 economic signals we should pay attention to most. There's a lot happening on social media. You go to Instagram, so much happening there. What used to be Twitter, a lot happening there too. Facebook, it's been happening since the Stone Age. Now, what are the 3 important things or 3 economic signals we should pay attention to as ordinary citizens of this country who are interested in the fiscal health of this country and our ringgit?
I mean, obviously, if you're a normal person like you and me right now, we're obviously afraid of what it means. What does the economy, how is the economy going to affect my living standards? So the interest rates play a very important role as usual, partly because if you want to expand your business, if you want to buy a house or a car, the loans actually depend on the interest rate. So between banks, they lend each other a certain interest rate. So if you say like the overnight rate or OPR is basically 2 or 3%, that's basically the lending between banks. But the money that they lend you, for instance, is actually going to be higher than that. It's going to be 4 or 5% because they need to make a profit from that. That's one thing, the interest rate. So that plays a critical role in whether you're able to buy certain things or do business and all that. And of course, there's inflation, right? I mean, we're looking at inflation. If the inflationary rate is actually too high, for instance, it basically means that, you know, things are getting really expensive. But more importantly, what happens?
So when do we know that the inflation rate is getting a little too high?
Yeah. Well, you can actually see the trends basically over the years anyway. So you could probably go log on and see what are the interest rates. I mean, what are the inflationary rate to this year and next year. So we call it year on year. This year to that year, how high is it going to be? Is it trending in a way that's actually expected? And usually economists like myself or bankers basically would actually talk about whether the inflationary rate is actually stable. It's still going up. Okay, the prices are more expensive, but is it stable? Is it actually going higher and higher?
So can we use the loaf of bread analogy?
I mean, that's a very simple way of saying it.
I mean, if your loaf of bread for the week or for the day is now 8 ringgit, as opposed to 6 ringgit before the conflict, would that be a sign?
I mean, that's probably a sign that things are.
You know, economists may laugh and be smug about it, but for people like us, we need some sort of indicator on the ground.
I wouldn't say you know, we're smug about it. I mean, economists are normal
My
people
apologies
also,
there.
but but I mean, some people in the U.S., for instance, use the McDonald's prices as an indicator. So maybe we could use like nasi lemak, you know, the pacik nasi lemak as an indicator how expensive things may be. I wouldn't use bread, you know, but maybe nasi lemak. Or economy rice and stuff like that. That may be a better indicator, actually.
And during times of global uncertainty, should people panic about the economy, or is the system usually more resilient than it appears to be. We've got about a minute left.
Yeah, I'll tell you one thing. One of the things about the economy is that it's usually run on confidence. So sometimes people are very confident, and then you actually start dumping or investing too much in a particular asset that causes bubbles, like things become too expensive. But sometimes people panic too much, even though it's not necessarily the fundamentals are still strong, and it causes a crash in the economy or a crash in the markets a little bit. But then when people actually start realizing, wait, why am I so scared again? Because is it a herd effect? When that actually dies off, then people start, okay, this is an overreaction. Let's go back to where we were. So I would say, yes, many economies in the world are more resilient than we think they are, and people often overreact to it.
Right. With that, thank you very much, Dr. Chee Meng. It was a pleasure, and I must say it was an honor having you in the studio for the first time. Of course, you've been here many times before, and I hope to do this once again with you. Dr. Tan Chee Meng from University of Nottingham, helping us better understand the ringgit, the reforms underway, and what they mean for Malaysia's economy. And outside forces, geopolitics, and supply chain pressures continue to test us, test that progress. Safeguarding it will matter more than ever. With that, I'm GERARD RATNAM. This has been The Nation right here on Bernama TV. Join us for conversations that matter next time, once again, right here on Bernama TV. You have a great day ahead, my friend. Thank you very much, Doctor.